going on, guys? Welcome to the 7th seminar in our light tackle marathon. We're going to be doing a bunch of videos leading up to our event on April 11th. It's going to be a really fun event. We're going to have a parking lot party. We're going to have kids, games, and prizes, barbecue, rod and reel trade-in, as well as a lot of deep discounts on all of your light tackle fishing gear. Today, I am here with Captain Drew Grahame of Griffin's Guide Service. He's going to talk to us about a fun one today. That's going to be open water bull reds and cobia. So Drew, you want to tell the people a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Griffin's Guide Service, and we'll get into some fishing.
I'm Captain Drew Grahame. I'm a guide for Griffin's Guide Service. We do charters up and down the bay for a variety of species year round. Red drum's kind of one of my favorite things to do, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. So first thing we'll talk about, we'll get into some of the lures here. I see you've got some plastics and jig heads. Is that sort of the main thing you throw? Is going to be a big paddle tail on a jig head?
Yeah, it just kind of covers all your bases, and in my opinion, the drum aren't that picky. It's just about getting the bait to them. So that's why I kind of have a variety of weights and a variety of, normally I carry a couple different sizes of paddle tails just to play with my depth and speed a little bit, but it's more about getting a quality bait to the fish that's going to hold up. For sure.
And it looks like your selection here is going to be the Z-Man diesel minnows and the GI jig heads. What's sort of your reasoning behind picking those pairings there?
So for the diesel minnows, one, they have great action. You can get two different actions, different ways you rig it, but they also hold up. So if you're throwing a bait that's tore up after a drum, and while they don't really have teeth, they have a sandpaper, that bait will grind off and be all chafed up and flaked up. You can throw a Z-Man all year round until you lose it. They'll hold up to every fish, and you can't tell that it even had a fish on them. The GIs, we go with one, the quality's unmatched, and he makes them with a HD hook. So you need a big hook. You're pulling a 30 to 50 pound fish, and with some pressure on it, a lot of drag. So an HD hook really holds that fish from bending it out.
For sure, yeah. You don't want to lose a big drum bending it out. That's a fish of a lifetime.
Yeah, you're looking for a trophy fish. You're committed to being there, putting the time in. You don't want your tackle failure to be the reason you didn't get it.
100%. And what about color selection? Does that have to do with depth or sunlight or lack thereof?
As far as paddle tails, no. Not. I like all the colors, honestly, for a red. Like I said, it's really, to me, about getting them down there. There's certain guys, certain days this color might work a little bit better, but a lot of time you can throw 7 different paddle tails into the same school and all 7 of them get eaten. I kind of just tend to go with a natural color just because it's what I use for most of my stuff. So, a pearl, this new one, the blue mackerel, which was kind of designed for the Chesapeake anyway. I think it's very bait fish mimicking for our local forage. And so chartreuse is always good. I mean, I'm not too picky about color. A lot of guys focus on it a lot more than I think is needed, but I think it's just being where the fish are and having quality bait to hook them with.
For sure, and that's, I think, going to be relieving to a lot of people who might, obsess about color and buy every different color of Z-Mans, but I think that'll be refreshing to know for some people. Now, you talked about you're less worried about color and more worried about just getting that bait to the fish.
Yes.
So if I had to guess, and you'll tell me, you're more picky about jig head size than anything else.
Yes, and that's why I have up here, I have 1.5 ounces all the way up to a 4 ounce. And a 4 ounce might sound crazy, but bear with me. Every day is a little different out there. You got different winds. You find the fish in different depths. You got better currents changing throughout the day. You might be on a major, might be on a minor. The most important thing when drum fishing is getting your bait to the drum when you find them, and that happens very quickly. The time between you finding those fish and casting is about 6 seconds. So you need your jig to go right where you were directed by side scan as quick as possible. And if you're in 50 foot of water on a 25-mile-an-hour wind throwing a 7-inch bait, it's going to take your jig longer to get down. So that's when I might step up my weight a little bit to a 3. If you're really having one of those days where you might not be having a blast out there and get a little wet, I'll throw a 4 ounce. It's just getting it to them as quickly and accurately as possible that catches more reds than anything.
For sure. Now, what about jig head color? Does that matter to you, or is that sort of the same?
Kind of the same thing on the reds. I'm pretty simple. I throw about the same ones personally and as a guide. I like a chartreuse. I like a pink. I like the blue sparkles. Again, I don't think it's a huge difference maker. I think it's just having that HD hook and a head that's going to hold up to all day's use.
For sure, for sure. Now, talking a little bit about finding these fish, you mentioned that a lot of the time you're looking for them on side scan. I know it's a tough game. Just to keep it blunt, it's a tough game looking for and finding these fish. But if you had tips for people out there going out on their own boats, where do you start? What do you look for if you wanted to get yourself on a nice bull red?
It's a tough game. The secret is cover as much water as you can and burn as much fuel as you can, covering as much water on side scan as your boat can. They're not super patternable. Certain weeks they'll do a couple certain things, but kind of every day you start fresh. So, we start to look on ledges, big ledges, even to small ledges. And that, one that might just be an interception point where they're pushing bait to feed. But, there's also days we'll find them in the most flat up on a ledge you've ever seen, and there's no reason they're there. So it's literally just covering as much water. Don't chase everybody else that's looking. It doesn't do everybody any good to be on top of each other looking in the same spot. You're much better, your odds are just as good finding them off by yourself. So just really burn the gas and cover water and be committed to it.
That's good to know. That's good to know. It's definitely trophy chasing when you're looking for these bull reds.
There's nothing easy about them.
Yeah, for sure. What about cobia? When you guys are out there looking for bull reds, you oftentimes will see cobia on the surface. How do you sort of approach catching a cobia, casting to a cobia, the way you present your lure? Would you approach that differently than you would a bull red, if you do differently?
I do. So cobia, we get couple good days this summer where you can actually sight fish and have the conditions for it. I keep a rod up in the tower with me that's rigged a little different than my drum rod. I usually have a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce GI on it, HD, the same thing, with a 5 to 7 inch Z-Man. And I go lighter because you're obviously seeing that fish on the surface, and if you're adding up a Z-Man, so you're adding some float to it, that bait's going to sink really slow, and you can kind of suspend it right in front of him and twitch it and swim it and just try to aggravate him to the point he eats. You don't want to put it on top of him. You want to cross his nose and make him bite it because he's so mad at looking at it. So that's why I like a lighter head with a bigger bait. It'll just float there for a little bit longer and just hang in front of him. Just being really easy when you come up on them and trying to look ahead and find them before they've already got their wits about them.
For sure. So you would say getting a bite from a cobia is more about pissing it off than it is about...
Not always. Cobia are finicky. There's days they'll eat right away. There's days you can chase them for 2 hours before they'll eat. And we've done both. And it's just... But having that lighter head with a big floating bait like a Z-Man gives you a little more time where you're keeping that bait right in front of that fish's mouth. And, you might see him take off for it. He might leave. But that's your best chance on him. It's just keeping the bait in front of him as long as they can. And then with the Z-Man, it'll, since it's somewhat floating of a plastic, the tail is still wiggling, doing all this action while you're barely moving it itself to keep it where it needs to be.
Cool. Well, that's really good to know. What about gear? So I see you've got a rod right here that you guys run on all your bull red and cobia trips. You want to tell us a little bit about why you run this combo and why it's good for that fishery? Yeah,
so this is the Loomis Pro Blue. It's a medium heavy. It's a fast action, but it's still relatively moderate. And you don't need a super sensitive rod for these big reds. You notice when they eat, they're not subtle. It's gone, But it has enough sensitivity to detect a little less bite and still has the backbone and a little bit of play in the blank that you can fight that fish, still enjoy it, but get the fish in reasonable amount of time to get back and hook another one, hopefully. And also being a little more on the modern end, you can cast these baits a lot further. You want to be able to cast as far as you can. You might get told the fish are 100 feet off the left side of the boat. That's a long cast, especially when you factor in that boat's still going this way and those fish were back here. So you need to be able to sling it with those rods, and that's why we like that blank. For reels, we use a Twin Power 5000. It's just kind of a workhorse for us. They hold up really well. The drag's super smooth. You get a lot of runs with big reds. We call it the thump and dump. You need that drag to be very calm and smooth the whole time that fish is running out, because if it gets real jerky, that's when you start seeing either line failure or something's going to break from that shock. So that's why we like the Twin Power 5000.
For sure. Definitely a workhorse of a reel, as you said. What about line? So what do you guys run for your main line, and what do you do leader wise?
We do 30-pound Power Pro Super Slick V2 for our main line. It's plenty. There's not much. There's nothing in the bay you can't do on 30-pound line. It handles the Cobia as well. Our big thing is we step up our leader to a 40-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon, and you want that leader to be, you want minimum, I'd say 30 inches of fluorocarbon leader when you're fishing for reds. One, you need to get it over their back fins. Two, when you hook these fish, they're in these massive schools. So your line is pulled tight when you're hooked up to a fish, and other reds are swimming through, especially if that bait's hanging out of that first fish's mouth, trying to eat it. And you will feel that leader bounce off other fish, and that's how you can lose fish if that leader's not long enough and those fins hit braiding.
So you're saying you definitely want that abrasion resistance.
Yes, and that's what the fluorocarbon's great for from Seaguar.
Cool. Well, I think that's about it as far as doing the bull reds and the cobia. I mean, the biggest thing I'm getting is you just got to cover water.
Cover water
seems to be the hardest part
Cover
about
water,
it.
be there. Don't get disappointed. It's hard for everybody out there. It's just the guys that work harder catch more fish.
Yeah, that tends to be how it goes for sure. Well, thanks for coming in, Drew. Before we wrap up, you want to tell the people where they can find you, where they can find Griffins, and if they wanted to book a trip with you, how they go about doing that.
Yeah, we're on all social media platforms as Griffin's Guide Service, Facebook, Instagram, griffinsguideservice.com. Go straight to our website and our booking apps. And then Steve's phone number and contact information is all on that, and you can call him directly if you have any questions.
Cool. Remember, guys, April 11th, that is going to be our light tackle event, so make sure you come on by for all the fun stuff we've got going on. Drew, thank you so much
for
coming in
me
today. Yeah.
Talk about fishing.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.